Okay guys, this is Alan Forrest Smith from masterman.com, alanforrestsmith.com, and a few other websites. Now tonight's subject is how to write an expert book, or how to write a book using your expertise or being an expert. In the year 1989, I opened my first hairdressing salon. And I quickly found out during that period, the next 20 years, that I didn't really know enough about running a business, running a hairdressing salon. And at the same time, other experts who came into my salon would either be ripping me off, they'd be taking far too much money off me, they'd be up to all kinds of things, staff, everything else. And it's simply because I didn't have the expertise as a young business owner and a young hairdresser. So as the years went on, I decided to create something which would help my business and my salon run a lot smoother. Of course, at the time, I just thought it was a business document. I certainly didn't think it was an expert book of any sort. And by the year 1999, I published that as an expert book. That book was called Salon Column Builder, which an appointment book in a hairdressing salon is called a column. Each slot is called a column. So it was all about building a column. It was all about running a salon. It was all about making things super effective within that industry. And quite honestly, I sold thousands and thousands and thousands of those books, which moving forward to today, although I've not been a hairdresser for a long, long time, actually almost 20 years, I still write books for that industry. Now, before I tell you anything else about how to do it, here's one of the books I've written. It's a 600-page business manual, which is one of our best-selling products, one of our best-selling books. And we send these all over the planet. On top of that, I also have other paperback books. We have this one, The Ultimate Missing Client Kit, Salon Sampler, Copywriting, and this Salon Punk book, which again is a bestseller. Now, these books are all, they're created for two reasons. One, this one is created to establish me as an expert. And actually, I've only written this recently. I should have done this 20 years ago, but I've done it all back to front. I wrote the big manual and then a few other things before. And then I decided while we were living in our other house in Tbilisi for 5 or 6 months, I would finally write this book that I've been talking about writing for a long time. So how do you write an expert book, and why should you write an expert book or a book on expertise? First of all, it's very different from writing anything else. Very different from writing fiction or from writing any other kind of or type of book. It's very different because although you have stories in there, you're just really telling stories about your experience within that expert area. And the reason I wrote this particular one was to really, you see, one of the things I have as an expert in one of my chosen fields, which is the hair and beauty industry, running businesses and transforming businesses, is that you still have to establish yourself as, I've been there, I've done that, and I have the experience. So this particular book was actually my whole story, going from a young kid to eventually becoming the owner of a #1 hairdressing salon. And the story probably covers, well, it covers from the 70s when I was a young kid, really young kid. And my mum was turning everybody into Ziggy Stardust lookalikes. And then it finishes up until today, which is the work I still do in the hairdressing industry. Now, this book, actually, I should have done it 20 years ago because it exploded another area of my online business within this industry, which can be found at salonpunk.com. So the reason you should write an expert book is only if you want to be known for a particular area of expertise. If you're known within that area of expertise, you become the only, or you have the opportunity to become the only go-to guy within that industry when it comes to wanting to speak to a true expert. Now, of course, within this industry, yes, there's loads of wannabes like any other industry. There's loads of people who want to be experts with no expertise and so on. But what the expert book does is it proves, one, that you know your industry inside out, and you know what you're talking about within that industry, and you also have experience or have an empathetic approach to the industry individuals who read that book. And because of your empathy and because of your familiarity within that marketplace, it puts you at a totally different expert level, and it allows customers, clients, call them as you like, to come to you to ask and to pay for your expertise. So a little less about me and a little bit more about you. How do you write an expert book? First of all, the best way to write an expert book, some people online will tell you to do it this way. Pick a subject, record the subject, and pretend to be an expert and everybody will buy it. That's not really the best way to do it, and it's a little bit fake, quite honestly. To create an expert book, you have to have a story, and you can only have a story if you have expertise within that area. If you don't have expertise within that area, how can you be the expert? How can you say that I'm an expert in this area unless you have no expertise in that area? So the first thing you need to do is to find what you're an expert in. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and he told me about a trade that he was involved with for a long, long time. And I said to him, so you're a bit of an expert? And he said, not really. He said, there's people who've been doing this longer than me. I said, but you've just been telling me stories about things that happen within this industry that only you know. And he said, well, yeah, that's true. I said, well, that makes you an expert within that industry because you can answer questions that no one else can answer. Hence, that makes you an expert. So you have to have a history or an over familiarity on the subject to write an expert book. Because within the expert book, you need to write stories. And to write super effective stories, you need to have had experience within that industry. So for instance, in my Salon Punk book, there's a few stories in there about dealing with staff and stories that happen with staff, like when one of the girls fell downstairs. She tumbled and ended up upside down against the wall in the salon. Well, it's a story you can only tell if you lived that story. So there's a reason that you need this familiarity to be able to tell these stories that are authentic and these stories that are also real as well. And if they're not real, most readers these days can smell a rat. They will know that you are not talking about the truth. So once you have your expertise or something you've been an expert in for a lot of your life or a good portion of your life, you can then begin to create the framework of your expert book. Now, when I've created my framework for my book, this second book I wrote, this expert book, The Accidental Copywriter, again, it was a similar principle to the Salon Punk book. It's a best-selling book. We've sold a lot of these books, sent them all over the place. This book was put together again to tell the story of how I accidentally became a copywriter from being a hairdresser. So the way I did mine, and you can do yours different because there's very, very many different ways of doing expert books, is to tell the whole story from start to finish, but use those stories to shine as an expert within those areas and shine in those moments where it really mattered that you had to shine. And this is where you really show and prove your expertise. So you find your expertise, you tell your story, and of course you have to tell stories or facts and figures and supporting proofs to let people know, let readers know that you are an expert. So you would have to mix your story with actual outcomes and actual events that really did take place that you can write down as really rock solid proof. And really, guys, as far as an expert book goes, that is really just about what you have to do. To write an expert book, you really just have to take your expertise and get it written down. Start the story. How did it begin? How did you get interested? I mean, if your expertise was a complete disaster, well, I would think twice about doing it. But if it was a triumph, people want to know what happened in their industry successfully by someone else. So if you have an expertise and you have a good story to tell, start documenting it. I did mine in periods. I did my hairdressing story began in 1985 when I had my first business, in 1989 when I opened my first salon, 1999 when I opened my 91, I opened my second salon, 93 when I opened my third salon, and then different events through 95, 96, all the way to the time when I sold my final salon in 2003. So you can construct your story in a way that takes readers through a journey from start to finish, as long as it has triumphant moments that they can relate to. And of course, an expert story, try and stay positive, try and stay optimistic. Yeah, tell the disasters, but maybe do it with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, a bit of sarcasm, a little bit of humor, not too much because it's hard to transfer humor onto paper. But make sure that you sound human, and make sure you sound at a level that people will relate to, people will want to understand, and people will want to read more about. And that's quite simply how you create an expert book. Again, like I say, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's other ones that are not here, probably 9 or 10 expert books, and lots and literally thousands of blogs within the hairdressing industry field on my blog and my other website over at salonpunk.com. So guys, that's it. If you want to write an expert book, pick up your expertise, note it all out, journal the whole thing out, the stories, the highlights, the triumphs, the sadness, and everything else. And there you have the basis and the grounding and the foundation for your expert book. So this is Alan Forrest Smith from mastermind.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook. Don't forget to click like on the video below, or go through and look at the other videos. And of course, if you're looking for a writing mentor, an author's mentor, or even to be published, you know exactly where we are. Thanks everyone. Until the same time next Tuesday, I will see you then. Thanks for listening.